So, hello, everybody. This is the time in our service when our special spiritual guest engages in a chat with me for all of us. And today we're extremely blessed to have Sailesh Rao, PhD. He is a systems engineer and he was busily at work on something you guys have heard of called the internet when he learned about the animal agriculture climate connection. And the vast importance of that issue caused him to leave the work that he had been doing and devote himself 24/7 to solving the climate crisis by going after animal agriculture first, as well as an embracive plan to change our attitudes. I'd almost say to bring about a global spiritual awakening. And he does this through his wonderful organization, climatehealers.org. Welcome, Dr. Rao.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
Well, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. And it's very special to me that I am talking with someone from India, someone who comes from what we call the Hindu tradition, the Vedic tradition, because I just finished my 14th book and it is called Age Like a Yogi. So I have been immersed for the past several months in this beautiful tradition, which is your birthright. And it just seems really special that we're talking today. So, start off, if you would, please, and just explain the problem to us. Why is the Earth, why is humanity in the state it's in? And from a systems engineer, from a Vedic scholar, what do we do?
Okay. We are in the state that we are in because for the last 10,000 years, we have been heating the climate. And we have actually done something amazing by heating the climate. We have prevented the Earth from going back to another ice age 5,000 years ago. And we kept the temperature constant, which allowed us to continue agriculture. And but in the process, the last 200 years after we discovered fossil fuels, we have raised the temperature by 1.2 degrees Celsius. But in the process, we have also created all the tools and technologies we need to understand what we have done, and therefore now become conscious climate regulators or climate harmonizers of the planet, so that the
So,
Earth can never go back to another ice age again. Yeah.
so I've seen, actually, other people have picked this up now too, but I saw it first from you, a chart about the weight of life on the planet, the biomass. And that was one of the most life-changing things I have ever witnessed. So can you explain a little bit about the obesity crisis, but in a way that you wouldn't think of it?
Yes. So we have taken away land from wild animals, converted that to cropland or grazing land or managed forests, mostly grazing land, because and then we have raised animals, domestic animals on that grazing land in far greater numbers than what would be found in nature. So the estimate is that we have reduced the biomass of wild animals, or the total weight of wild animals, from 10,000 years ago to today by almost 90%. Okay, we have reduced their weight by 90%, but in their stead, we have actually created domestic animals that weigh 12 times as much as all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago in terms of equivalent weight. I call it equivalent weight because these domestic animals that we raise, we kill them and they're still babies. So they haven't fully grown by the time we kill them, and which means for their weight, they're actually eating twice as much food as you would expect a normal mix of animals to eat. So they're presenting a profile that's 12 times the biomass or the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. And our weight alone humans alone, we are double the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. So this is in our category, the megafauna category, which is animals greater than, I think, 20 kgs or so is the average weight. So we've basically taken over the earth.
And how do we give it back?
Go vegan. It's so simple. It's what is fascinating to me is that this solution, going vegan and stop consuming animals for any purpose whatsoever, this solution actually addresses all six of the planetary boundary violations that we have seen on planet Earth. So it's as if there are six fires going on in your home, and there is one action you can do that will put out all six fires. Why wouldn't you do it? Of course you'll do it.
So why is it such a hard sell? I mean, know that you have been to most of the COP summits. You have
Right.
spoken with people who are very involved in this around the world. I believe you've had contact with former Vice President Al Gore. And all we hear is carbon, 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 drive something different. The food issue is getting out a little bit here and there at the edges, but most people, even most environmentalists, are still pretty clueless.
Yeah, it's a hard sell because of the way the mainstream media frames it. The mainstream media doesn't frame it as six fires and there's one action that you can do that would solve all six fires, because that would completely change the system. So they're looking for a solution within the system. It's a solution where they can make money of the action that you're taking, because we are all in that game. It's a money game that we are playing. And so the way the mainstream media frames it is that the only fire that's important is climate change. Ignore the other five fires, even though they're actually three of them are bigger than climate change. Okay?
What can you list them for us, Dr. Rao?
Yeah, the ones that are bigger than climate change are chemical pollution, because we are pouring 250 billion tons of chemicals into the environment every year, and it's contaminating our water, it's killing life because of that. And nitrogen and phosphorus loading. So we are extracting nitrogen and phosphorus wherever we could find them from the atmosphere, from the ground, and we're using it as fertilizer on our land in order to grow more and more crops. In the process, all these excess nitrogen and phosphorus is flowing into the ocean and creating dead zones where it kills life. That's even worse than climate change. And the last is biodiversity loss, and basically habitat destruction, where we take away land from animals. So we have actually taken away 91% of the earth for ourselves. Only 9% is left for the wild animals. This is why they are down by 90% from what they used to be. And that's on land. And in the ocean, we are bottom trawling an area of the ocean floor the size of South America every year to grab the last remaining fish. So when you bottom trawl, you're killing everything, including the kelp forests, everything that's down there. You kill it just to get the fish. And by doing that, we are only getting 15% of the food we eat from fish and animal sources. So 85% of the food we eat is already plant-based. It's not such a big leap to go from 85% to 100%. But if you did that, you'll free up 40% of the land area of the planet. You can return it back to nature, and you can return the entire ocean back to nature. And when you do that, you solve all six of these fires, the fires on the planet. So, but the way the mainstream media frames it, it's only climate change that's important. And within climate change, they frame it as only fossil fuels that's important. So this way they can sell us electric cars and solar panels, and the economy grows. Whereas if the whole world goes vegan, the economy will shrink, and you have to change the entire game of money. You have to change the entire economy. I say we have to go from a consumer economy to a rewilding economy, where we are all focused on bringing back the forests, bringing back the wild animals. And I think we would be so much happier doing that than just consuming, consuming, consuming.
So when you say something like this to an Al Gore or someone in that position, What response do you get?
Yeah, they don't want to hear me. They say, get away from here. Yeah. It's because, they're making money off of this, right? So they're saying, it's like they're all on the upper deck of the Titanic. And they know it's the Titanic, but they're hoping that it'll run aground, and the upper deck will still be alive. And I keep telling them there are plenty of vegan lifeboats on the Titanic. We can all get on it.
It's a lot. So you were at the recent COP summit. Did anything there surprise you?
Well, I didn't go to COP28.
Oh,
I went to COP26, the last one I went to. And I was shocked at, the fact that they were still eating animals, number one. And number two, they agreed to halt deforestation by 2030, which I believe is too late from a scientific perspective. And they say we are going to halt deforestation by 2030. I take that to mean we will continue deforesting until 2030. Yeah, and then we'll look at it then, right? And to me, it's like kicking the can down the road. And I said, you're not being serious. So I said, I'm not going to attend any more COPs until they become 100% vegan. Then I know that they are serious about solving the problem because
let's
it's staring us in the face, the
mm.
solution. Yeah.
So let's move a little bit into some of the spiritual background for some of these things that you're talking about. You've written a couple of books, Carbon Yoga and Carbon Dharma. And for any
Mhm.
of the yoga people, you know both of those terms. Yoga is union with all life, union with the divine. Dharma is our duty, the divine job we're to do on earth this lifetime. So talk to us a little bit about Carbon Yoga and Carbon Dharma.
Carbon Dharma it's about what is the right thing to do. I mean, I was looking at it from a Hindu spiritual perspective also, and also from a scientific perspective. And what the right thing to do is to be compassionate to all life. And that solves all the problems. Okay, so compassion just quenches all these fires. And so it was sort of obvious to me, and I was wondering why people are not seeing it, So I wrote it down. I wrote it right after my granddaughter was born because I wanted to make sure that even if I get hit by a bus, at least everything I know is on paper somewhere. And then I wrote Carbon Yoga in 2016, which is around the time the Pinky Promise happened with my granddaughter. And that's basically about how do we go about doing it. And it's really about, uh, framing the story and helping people understand the story because it's through stories and games that we coordinate our actions as people. This is how we form a civilization. So we need to change our stories and we need to play different games. Okay? And it's very simple, actually, when you think about it.
Well, speaking of stories, the
Mm.
religions and spiritual teachings of the world are largely a collection of incredible stories. And one of those is the beautiful Indian scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. And I know that you have recently offered seminars on the Bhagavad Gita. And for people who are not familiar with it, if you could just explain a little bit about what it is. And then also answer the question that I certainly had as a teenager when I was introduced to this scripture for the first time. In it, the divine figure Krishna is encouraging his cousin to do his duty, which is go into battle. And I was reading it during the Vietnam War era, and it's like, no, that can't be right. He must be
Right.
saying, don't go into battle. But no, he was saying, go into battle. So help us understand that.
Well, you have to understand the origin of the two sides who are fighting the battle. These were cousins. They basically were born to two brothers, right? And the first set of cousins were all born of immaculate conceptions. And they were born to a king, King Pandu, who meditated for the rest of his life in the forest after he accidentally shot a Brahmin and his wife in the act of copulation. So when the Brahmin was dying, he cursed King Pandu, saying that if you ever sleep with your wives, you're going to die. So he decided to not sleep with his wives anymore, and he went and meditated for the rest of his life. So his wives then had these boons from which they could get immaculate conceptions with the gods. So they got uh, a child from Lord Dharma, that was Yudhishthira, a child from Lord Vayu, the wind god, and that was Bhima, a child from the thunder god, the god of thunder, Indra, and that was Arjuna. And then from the Gemini twins, they got Nakula and Sahadeva, the five main characters on one side of the battle. So Dharma represents justice. So Yudhishthira represents justice. Bhima represents strength. Arjuna represents courage. And Nakula and Sahadeva represent kindness and compassion. So those are the five brothers. So the idea there is that you have to know what is the right thing to do. That's justice. You need to then gather the resources to do the right thing, which is what Bhima brings. Then you have to have the courage to take the battle, to fight the battle of life. That's Arjuna. And then you have to execute with kindness and compassion. That's Nakula and Sahadeva. Okay. So in the Gita, Lord Krishna is talking to Arjuna, who represents courage. Because without courage, you will not fight the battle of life. Okay? And on the other side, King Pandu's brother was Dhritarashtra, who was a blind king. And his wife blindfolded herself. So King Pandu represents the disciplined mind, and his wives represent a discriminating intellect. And on the other side, you have a blind mind and a blindfolded intellect. And that resulted in 101 demons, who were the cousins of the Pandavas. They were called the Kauravas. So the Bhagavad Gita is really literally Lord Krishna asking us to fight the battle of life. Don't give in. Don't give in to temptations. Don't give in to these things and just say, let my cousins win, right? No, you have to have the courage to fight the battle of life so that you can implement dharma. What is the right thing to do? Okay. So that's so appropriate for what we are doing now, right? And so there are prescriptions on how do you go about doing it. What do you do in any circumstance? How to treat everyone as God. Everyone is doing their best, right? That's the assumption we make when we deal with people. And then you help them. You give them the tools they need so that they can take action on their own. Because at the end of the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, where he instructs Arjuna why he should fight the battle. So this battle could be a battle within ourselves. It could be a battle in society. When we go vegan, we're actually fighting a battle with our cousins and our family members because they don't want to go vegan, right? So you see this happening all the time in at different levels, right? And with this, he tells Arjuna how to do it. And at the end, he says, I love you so much that I've set you free even from me, and you're free to choose whether you want to fight or not. Okay? But he said, the outcome is the same, regardless of what you decide. The only thing you're deciding is how much suffering you have. If you don't fight, you're going to suffer more, and then you'll eventually come around.
Ah, your granddaughter is really lucky to have such a storyteller right there in the family. I mean, I could sit and listen to you for a really long time. So there is another concept that comes from the same tradition, and that is ahimsa. And we hear it bantered about in the vegan and vegetarian world. Can you just talk a little bit about the concept of ahimsa and what we should be doing with it?
Ahimsa it's a Sanskrit word. In Sanskrit, it's the word himsa with an A next to it. So which means the exact opposite of himsa. Himsa is deliberate cruelty. I mean, it's like, you're deliberately hurting someone. Ahimsa is the exact opposite. It's deliberate kindness. It's just implemented kindness, right? And compassion. So it's translated loosely as non-harming. And people who practice ahimsa, you practice ahimsa at the level of sentient beings, or at the level of plants and animals. I mean, plants and insects as well. So there are some people who don't kill plants. So they don't eat root vegetables because they don't want to kill the plants. They rather just prune the plant and eat whatever needs to be eaten, or the fruits or the vegetables that the plant gives you. So it's what level you want to take it to is it's a journey that you're on. So you start on the path of ahimsa, you'll keep going down to um, minimalism pretty much at the end. Okay. And you'll get happier and happier. And that's what I found. As you do this, you get happier and happier. So it is a joyful journey that you're on.
And one of the things that you do that I didn't mention in your introduction is that you've been involved in several films. I think we actually met on the production team of A Prayer for Compassion. You're also part of a film called The Land of Ahimsa,
Mm.
about India. And it is the land of ahimsa, and it's not yet the land of veganism because
Right.
there is this cow in the room. So,
Right.
talk to us a little bit about dairy in the Hindu tradition and in Indian culture, and what you're doing and what other people are doing to try to get that to shift.
Yeah, good question. In the Hindu tradition especially, we have a lot of stories that are symbolic and allegorical, like the story of the Mahabharata, which you thought was a real battle, and you were saying, why is Lord Krishna asking you to fight the battle, right? So it was so confusing in that sense. In the same way, Lord Krishna was brought up by a cowherd, and so he was used to raise cows as a child, and then he used to steal butter, and that story has been used to market dairy, okay, in the modern context. But it's a very symbolic story, just like this, as I told you, the Bhagavad Gita, the symbolism of the five brothers and the symbolism of the Kauravas. Um, in the symbolism, milk represents a fluid mind that has doubts about God, to which you add the thought of God and you let it curdle. When you churn it, it becomes butter. So that is the solid mind that has no more doubts about God. It's the mind of a devotee. This is why Krishna loves butter, because he's always said he loves devotees. A devotee calls me, I come. I will drop everything and come, he said. Okay, so he loves the mind of a devotee. This is why he loves butter. When you take that butter and you refine it, you get ghee, which is the refined solid mind that has no more doubts about God, which is the enlightened mind. This is why we use ghee in our arati, for um, in our offering to God. So this symbolism has been taken literally and used to market products, which I feel like is a desecration of our stories. And I've written to the head of Amul, and I've asked him to please cease and desist, because you are taking our sacred stories and trying to market your products with it, which is actually unhealthy products. 60 to 80% of Indians cannot even digest lactose, and they're being sold dairy and they are getting sick. Um, so it's really a travesty what's going on there.
And so, how do you communicate this to both Indians and to Americans who have taken up yoga and feel that they too are entitled to all the milk and cheese and butter that they can consume?
Yeah, we have to explain the stories to them. It's really education, right? So I'm trying to train a lot of people now. So I have a class that I'm doing, 8-week class, where I'm training people to tell the climate healer story, so we can go and spread the word. It's like gospel. We need a lot of people going around spreading the good news that that we are going to transform. We are going to make this jump.
So,
Mhm.
I need to ask you something of a devil's advocate question.
Okay.
You made the pinky promise to your granddaughter that you are going to do everything you can to bring about a vegan world by 2026. And
Right.
when I met you in 2015 or so, that seemed far enough away that it seemed reasonable. Well, it's 2024. Have you amended that at all? Where are we with Vegan World 2026?
Well, 2026 was a date I picked based on necessity, scientific necessity, and ecological necessity. You cannot kill all the wild animals and expect to recover. Okay. Now, almost all the wild animals we expect to recover. So it's already screaming at us to stop. So I liken this as a fire, right? So there are 6 fires happening on the planet. And they have been listed by the Stockholm Resilience Institute. It's water use, using too much water, we're using too much land use change, climate change, nitrogen and phosphorus loading, chemical pollution, and biodiversity loss. These are the 6 fires that are happening on the planet. And I use the analogy of the fire that happened in my home in 1993. It happened because of a car that caught fire the next morning. When my son came and told me there's smoke coming out of the vents, there's something wrong. At first, I told him it must be it was a new house. It must be the heater that came on, so don't worry about it. I told him to go back. He came out again and said, Dad, this is serious. There's big smoke coming out of it. And I went and looked, there was black smoke billowing out of the vents, right, into the room above the garage. So I ran down to the garage to see what was going on, and the car was on fire. And it was spitting flames at me when I opened the door. So I knew immediately I had to take action. And the only thing I could think of was get my kids out of there as quickly as possible. So life was the most important thing I needed to save. I didn't go around looking for my passport or my wallet or my, you know, jewelry, my wife's jewelry, any of that. None of that mattered to me. It was the life that mattered, right? The same way, people now are not yet aware of the fires that are happening on the planet, but it's getting more and more intense. And we are being told, there are fires going on. You need to do something drastic, and you need to take care of life first and foremost, because that's the most precious thing on this planet. And I think we will wake up. We will wake up before it's too late. Okay? And this is why I have total faith in humanity that we will wake up and do this. In all of us, in all of you.
Well, that's good news. And may we all be positive enough to share it. So thank you so much, Dr. Sailesh Rao, climatehealers.org. Follow this man. You will be so glad you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.